Okay, next up we're going to create an enemy object. Firstly though, I can delete this bullet object from the scene because they are created when I press play and hit space now, because we saved it as a prefab earlier. If I want to make changes to the bullet object, I'll have to do it within this this prefab object here. So for the enemy, go to your sprites and drag it into the scene somewhere. The first thing we need to do is same as the bullet, add a rigid body, change the body type from dynamic to kinematic. We also want to add a collision because we need to detect when the bullet is overlapping with the enemy object, and so for that we're going to add a box collider 2D because it's a box shape, 2D box shape, and we want to click the checkbox that asks if this is a trigger because we are going to try and detect that. So rather than collide with it physically, it's just going to collide with it as a sort of trigger space so that we can then in code say, okay, when that's detected, delete that object. Also, we need to do this exact thing for the bullet object. So let's go back to your bullet prefab and select it, because this also needs collision in order to detect when it collides with the box objects. So the enemy object. Add component box collider 2D and make sure is trigger is checked. Then head to your scripts folder, right click, create new C# script, scr underscore enemy behavior, and then open this up. In theory, you should be able to manipulate this behavior using stuff that we've looked at for the bullet behavior. So all we want to do is create a reference to its transform, give it a speed value when it's created, use the get component function to get the transform component and put it into that value, then make it move upwards. You should be able to look at the bullet behavior and try and figure that out for yourself. If you want to pause the video and do that, that's good. If not, then I'll just do it now. So I've created a reference to a transform and called it enemy transform, and I've created a reference to a speed, a float called speed. I've then in void start said, okay, the enemy transform is equal to, and then use get component to do that automatically, and then in void update I've set the enemy transform's dot position to plus equals vector 3 dot down multiplied by speed. Then I just need to attach the script to my enemy. So here it's called enemy1. So let's change that. obj underscore enemy. It's fine. Give it a speed. Let's go with 0.1. And if I hit play, it should move downwards. It's moving down pretty fast though. 0.01. Let's try that. So it's moving down pretty slowly. Shooting at it. It's not doing anything though because we need to tell it what to do when it detects collision between the two things. So let's do that now. In order to do that, we need to give our enemy a tag. So if you look at objects in Unity, underneath the name in the inspector view, you've got this tag, and everything we've done so far has been untagged. If we check this drop down, there's a few like default tags that we can look at, but we actually want to create our own tag for this. So hit add tag and then just hit the plus button here. I'm just going to give this the name enemy and hit save. Then when I go back to the enemy object and select the drop down, we'll have this new one here at the bottom which says enemy. So give that the enemy tag. So open up the bullet behavior script. So we want to add a new function, and this one's going to be called on trigger enter 2D. Now just be careful with the autocomplete, it might add some stuff in that we don't need. So we don't want it to say private, and instead of collision we want it to say other. And so the way we are going to check when the bullet hits the enemy and will then destroy it is we want to use an if statement. So we're going to use if, and we're going to check to see if its tag is enemy. So we say if other, and when we say other, we're just referencing the object it's detected that we've collided with that has a trigger. If other dot tag is equal to, so we use two equal symbols for that, and then type in the tag as you spelt it when we created it, enemy. So if it's enemy, oops, no semicolon needed, open close curly braces, then we say destroy, and then open bracket other dot game object. So the other object we've collided with, just destroy it. So save that, head to Unity, and we'll check if that's worked okay. So if I hit play and shoot this enemy, it should destroy it, which it does. Brilliant. What I want my game to do is when I kill an enemy, I want to respawn another one at the top of it, just for testing purposes, and then we can implement something later on where we use time.time, and then every so often it will spawn a new thing. So for now, let's go back to our bullet behavior script. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit. So I'm going to add in a new reference here. So because we are going to, essentially when we're destroying the enemy, we're going to create a new one, as was the case with the player script. When we create a bullet, we need a reference to a game object. So we're going to say public game object and call this enemy respawned or something like that, or enemy respawn prefab. Just after we've destroyed that game object, a couple of things that we need to do. We are going to create a new vector 3 called enemy respawn position, and this is going to be equal to, when we create vector 3s, we need to put a new vector 3 and then give it a value. So in this case, I'm just going to put 0, 0, 0 for now, and then we'll explain what values we put here in a second. Then I'm going to use this instantiate, which we should know what that does by now. Creates an object, and the object that I want to create is the enemy respawn prefab that we created a variable for at the top there, and I want to create that at the enemy respawn position. And then the last thing that I need to do is, because we need an object, a position, and rotation, I'm just going to put quaternion. Don't worry about that. I'm not going to go into detail what that is. It just essentially will just give it a default rotation. So instantiate our enemy object at a position we specified, which was this position here. So 0, 0, 0 is not really going to work, because if we look at our in Unity and we move it to 0, 0, 0, or if I reset this, you can see 0, 0, 0 is the center of the screen. So if I shoot it and then it respawns right in the center of the screen, it's not really ideal. So I'm just going to move it upwards, and if we look at the Y value, you can see that that goes up positively. So we want to, if we set it to something like 6, then that would spawn it above the top of the game screen, so we wouldn't see it spawn in. So let's give it a Y value of 6 for now. And let's just check that this works. We will mess around with that X value, because of course with the value of 0, it's just going to spawn centrally each time, every time we destroy it. So let's just check how that works. Hit play. I'm going to shoot it, and okay, I've got an error because I forgot. So what we did here was we created a reference to the game object, but I haven't told it what game object to create, and that's why it's telling me you need to assign this a value. So if I head into my prefabs folder, select my bullet, and go to the bullet script here, it's got a new container here for enemy respawn prefab. I actually don't have a prefab for my enemy yet, but we should know how to create one. Just drag in this enemy object into our prefabs folder, and it creates this object underscore enemy, which will behave just as the one does in the editor. Select your bullet object again, scroll down to its script and drag the enemy object into enemy spawn respawn prefab. Then we should be able to see it respawn in and not get any errors. If I can shoot it, there you go. You can see in the top there that I'm shooting it, it's respawning, but it constantly respawns in the same spot, which obviously isn't ideal. We want it to respawn at different locations along that x-axis. So in order to fix that, let's go back into our bullet script, and we've got this vector3 enemy respawn position. So instead of 0, and even if we assign that a specific value, we don't want it to just respawn at the same x value every single time. We want it to be sort of randomized. So we're going to use a function which is random.range, and then in here we give it 2 values. So I've typed it out like this. So at the minute, it will return a value between 0 and 0, which isn't really what we want. So let's just check what values we want. So if I select the enemy object here and look at its x coordinate here, drag it across over to the edge, you can see maybe -9 would probably be a good value for that. And if I drag it to the other side, you can see +9 would probably be good for that. So any value between there would be suitable for it to respawn at. So if I say between -9 and +9, that way, every time it respawns our enemy, it will choose an appropriate location on the x-axis for it to spawn in at. I'm also just going to add in another line of code here, which just says destroy game object. So this is similar to this section up here, which says destroy other.game object, except it will destroy the game object that this script is attached to. In this case, our bullet, because otherwise we're just going to end up with the bullet it will pass through multiple enemies and destroy them, like a piercing shot effect, and we don't really want that. We could add it as a power-up later on, I suppose, but for the base game, we don't really want that. To test this a bit better as well, I'm just going to add a few more instances of that enemy prefab, not the sprite, the prefab, to get this working and test it out a bit better. So now I can sort of move around, shoot these enemies, and one's managed to pass through the bottom, but you can see how they are respawning in at random locations along the top there, which is brilliant. That's what we want. So a couple of things that we need to fix. You can see how the bullet object, if I just hold fire, is just going to create multiple clones of them, and if we zoom out, we can see that they just kind of continue on forever and ever. They sort of never stop, which is okay initially, but eventually, with like thousands of bullets it's not drawing them on screen, but it's got to remember where they are. It may cause issues further down the line. So with our bullet behavior in fixed update, we can just do a check which just says if our bullet transform dot position dot y is greater than 6. So I'm just using the 6 value that we got from earlier on down here. So if it's greater than 6, we can just use this destroy game object function. So I'm just going to copy and paste that into there, and that will destroy the bullet if it goes any higher than 6 on the y-axis. So although we can't add or remove from the values in our vector3, we can still reference them, so we can look at them and see if a number is bigger than that. So if we head to Unity and hit play, if I fire off a couple of bullets, you can see how they are getting to the top of the screen but being destroyed. And you can see here we haven't got a massive list of them, we've just got the one bullet